Okay, so this one is adding and subtracting unlike fractions. So we actually just talked about adding like fractions, and now we're going to discuss unlike fractions. And this is chapter 5.7 in your book. Now, adding unlike fractions is a little bit different than adding like fractions. Go ahead and give me a pause and go ahead and get this copied in your notes. To add fractions with unlike denominators, we need to rename the fractions with a common denominator. Then we add and simplify. Okay, so in the first lesson of adding like fractions, remember I kept stressing if they had like denominators? Well, now this is where it's coming into play. Because if a fraction has unlike denominators, I actually can't add it just like it is. So what I have to do is I have to actually kind of force it into having a common denominator. And to do that, I need to rename my fractions. So for example, I have 1/3. Oops, not writing. Bear with me for a second. Oh, okay. All right. Sorry about that. Okay. Hopefully I gave you some time to copy it down. So we've got 1/3 plus 2/5. Now you notice that there are unlike denominators. 3 and 5 are not like each other. But we can make them to have common denominators. Now a common denominator between 3 and 5 is going to be 15. Okay, so what we have to do is we have to get this 3 to be a 15 and this 5 to be a 15. Well, what do I have to do to this 3 in order to make it to get to this 15? Well, I'm going to have to multiply by 5. And whatever you do to the bottom, you've got to do to the top. Because that'd be kind of silly if you just went in and were like, oh, I'm just going to multiply the bottom by 5 just because I feel like it. So you actually just have to do times 5 to both of them. And that's what you see right here. So we have 1 times 5 is 5, and 3 times 5 is 15, as you see here. And then we look at the second fraction. So the second fraction denominator is a 5. Now we ask ourselves, what can we multiply by 5 to get us to 15? Well, we're going to have to multiply by 3. And if I multiply the bottom by 3, I have to multiply the top by 3. And 2 times 3 is 6. And we're adding. So we come here, and this is actually written for us right here. 5 over 16 plus 6 over 15. Now that we have common denominators, like we did before, we can just go ahead and add our numerators. So 5 plus 6 gives us 11, and we keep our denominator at being 15. All right, and then subtracting unlike fractions, similar to adding unlike fractions, of course, but we're subtracting. Go ahead and pause me for a moment and get this copied. Okay, so to subtract fractions with unlike denominators, we need to rename the fractions with a common denominator. Then subtract and simplify. Okay, so we've got 6/7 minus 2/3. Well, 7 and 3, are those common? No, but we can make them common by finding a common denominator. And what's common between 7 and 3? Well, it's 21. I kind of was ahead of myself as I was speaking and writing. What's common between 7 and 3 is 21. So we ask ourselves, what number can I multiply by 7 to get me to my new denominator of 21? Well, that's going to be 3. If I multiply the bottom by 3, I've got to multiply the top by 3. Okay, so 7 times 3 we said was 21, and 6 times 3 is 18. Right? So then we come here and we say, what number do I have to get to multiply by 3 to get to 21? And that's 7. So 3 times 7 is 21, and then we multiply by 7 on the top here, and we say 2 times 7 is 14. And we subtract. Okay, and then that's written for us right here. 18 minus 14 over, both of them have a common denominator of 21, so we can do this. Over 21, which is 4 over 21. All right, let's try some examples. Go ahead and get those copied in your notes. So we have a negative 1/4 plus a negative 2/3. Well, right away, your little red light should go off in your head that I can't right away add these fractions. First of all, I've got a 4 here, and I've got a 3 here. I should know that I can't add fractions with unlike denominators. Okay, but I can add them if they're like. So first of all, I've got to rename these fractions so I have like denominators. Well, what would be a like denominator for both of these guys? Well, what about 12? Okay, then we ask ourselves, well, how do I get from 4 to 12? Well, I can multiply by 3 on the bottom and multiply by 3 on the top. So 4 times 3 is 12. 1 times 3 is 3. Also, we have this little negative over here, so don't forget that guy. Plus, now we have 3 and 12 here. What can I multiply by 3 to get me to 12? Well, I can multiply by 4. And if I multiply by 4 on the bottom, got to do it to the top. And we've got 3 times 4, which is 12, and 2 times 4, which is 8. And then, oh, don't forget about this guy, little negative. Okay, so now I have common denominators, so I can just simply add my numerators. So I have a negative 3 plus a negative 8 all over, keep the denominators the same, 12. Now a negative 3 plus a negative 8 will give me a negative 11 over 12. Okay, so now we have another fraction, another example, and I would actually like you to try this one on your own. Go ahead and get yourself a common denominator and add your numerators. Pause me when you finish and we'll work it together. Okay, so first of all, we got to think about what would be our common denominator. Well, in this case, we could actually do 24. All right, and then we have to ask ourselves, what can we multiply by 8 to get us to 24? Well, we can multiply by 3. And if we multiply the bottom by 3, we've got to multiply the top by 3. And 8 times 3 is 24. 3 times 3 is 9. And then we come over here and we see 12. And what do we multiply by 12 to get to 24? Well, we multiply by 2. And 12 times 2 is 24. And if we multiply the bottom by 2, we've got to multiply the top by 2. So that gives us 14. And then here we just keep the same denominator as being 24. And we say 9 plus 14 will give us 23 over 24. All right, so now we're into subtracting. In this problem, 5 over 21 minus a negative 6 over 7. All right, so we are going to look at this, and we know that we can't just go ahead and subtract them like this because of our unlike denominators. Okay, so we've got to go in and we've got to make our common denominators. So here we have 7 and 21. What would be a common denominator between both 21 and 7? Well, if you guess 21, You are correct. Okay, so this is actually already over 21. So I don't have to change this, rename it at all. So I'm just going to bring down this 5 right here, just like that. And I've got a minus, a negative. All right, and then we've got 7 to 21. Well, what if I have to multiply by 7 to get me to 21? I have to multiply by 3. If I multiply the bottom by 3, I've got to multiply the top by 3. And 6 times 3 gives me 18. Okay, so I now have 5 over 21 minus a negative 18 over 21. Well, with my integer rules, if I have a minus minus, what can I do with that? Plus plus. So now this is actually 5 plus 18, which is a positive 23 over 21. Now we look at this and it's an improper fraction, and improper fractions are fine. You could also write it as a mixed number, which would be 1 and 2 over 21. Okay, so this again is a mixed number, and so we have to do something whenever we see a mixed number. And we've been working on it for a little bit, so I want you to go ahead and try this and see what you get. When you solve this, did you make yourself an improper fraction? 6 times 2 is 12, plus 1 is 13 over 2, minus 4 times 5 is 20, plus 1 is 21 over 5. Did you see that? Okay, and then from here, I can't subtract quite yet because I don't have common denominators. So I've got to make some common denominators. So I come over here and I can make a common denominator of 10. And I multiply by 5 here and by 5 here. 2 times 5 is 10. And 13 times 5, well, I can't quite do that in my head. Can I? 65? Is that 65? 65. And that's okay if you want to do some scratch work. That's no big deal. No shame in that. So we have 5. To get to 5, from 5 to 10, we have to multiply by 2. And we multiply by 2 on the top. And here we get 42 over 10. So now I have common denominators of 10. 65 minus 42. Okay. So we're actually going to subtract 65 minus 42, and we get 23 over 10. Excuse me. And so we can leave it as 23 over 10 as long as it's in its simplest form, and in this case it is. Or we can write it as a mixed number, which is 2 and 3 tenths. Okay, so now here's some extra practice for you guys. And I would like you to work on these. Oh, goodness. They're not unlike fractions. Hold on. And 8. I'm so sorry, guys. Go ahead and fast forward me to the end so we can get this. Okay, all right. So sorry about that. This is your extra practice for tonight, and we will check this tomorrow. And there it is, a little bit bigger for you guys. Go ahead and try these practices, and we'll check these tomorrow. Good luck, and hope you do well with it.